Okay, well, this is our third session of 4. Thank you for taking the interest to come. And these are the topics that we'll be looking at. So yesterday we talked about Baba's metaphysics, right? And the main focus was on the everything and the nothing on the one hand, and thinking the imagination. And I think that putting those two together is a central enterprise in formulating an integrated darshana. I hope some of that made sense. I had to do, because we had to do it kind of quickly, but I hope you get broadly what the idea is. Today, we're talking about cosmic architecture. That's a term that I came up with. And what I mean by it is I distinguish between the word, sometimes the word eternity is used to mean time going on and on forever. To me, it doesn't mean that. It means beyond time, where there is no time at all. The eternal now would be eternal. And for time going on forever, I'd use words like perpetuity or perennial or things like that. So that's, I feel, an important distinction. Things, when you talk about God's, the everything and the nothing, those are pertain to the eternal state of God. But matters of cosmic architecture, I would not call eternal, even though they are always there. As long as creation is there, these principles operative, but they operate within the illusory universe of time and space. So there are some of those aspects of Meherabad's darshana, right? You remember the word darshana. I'm using it to mean philosophy based on revelation, not intellect, and encompassing things like the spiritual path and ethics and all aspects of the understanding Baba gave of God, creation, and everything else. I'm using darshana to designate that. So these are some of the... Now, I've just observed these. It's not like Baba decreed these in any way, but I've observed certain fundamental patterns, and I actually wrote them up here. 3 trinities that... I just noticed these when I started doing these talks 15 years ago, but it's still, I still don't see other trinities to compare with these, and they are trinities. So we'll be going over some of those. One of them is here. God's triune nature, that's threefold nature, as knowledge, power, and bliss, and its cosmological consequences. Knowledge, power, and bliss. And this is actually huge, a huge part of Meherabad's darshana. I was talking yesterday, Bay, about the divine theme as the philosophical idea that Baba put forward, so to speak, as his signature philosophical idea, the one that he made most prominent. But this is an idea actually of comparable importance, I would say. Knowledge, power, and bliss. That's the first of these trinities. Second, God as the triune actor, creator, preserver, and destroyer. Right? And God speaks in the 10 States of God chapter, he uses the words emanator, sustainer, and dissolver. Same thing. And in Hinduism, we have this idea as Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh. Brahma is the creator, Vishnu is the preserver, and Mahesh, or Shiva, is the destroyer. The word that Dattatreya is the deity that combines these 3. By the way, one of Baba's 5 perfect masters, Narayana Maharaj, was a devotee of Dattatreya. That would be Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh. And Baba, in Infinite Intelligence, uses the word Ishwar, I wrote that here. Ishwar as a designation for this Trinity. Ishwar. Baba dropped the word, again, after the Westerners showed up in 1931-32, Baba simplified a lot. So he dropped words like this. So in God Speaks, you won't see it. But in God Speaks, Ishwar, Creator, Preserver, Destroyer, is the third state of God, right? There are 10 states of God, and the third is this one. So they correspond exactly. Okay, so that's the second of these three trinities. And, oops. The third is one which we directly experience. And that is the three states, wakefulness, dream, and sound sleep. Now in contemporary science, I think these would be understood as, I suppose, physiological conditions of the brain, right? But in Meher Baba's Darshana, they're much more than that. They're cosmological principles of profound significance. Actually, Baba, this is right there in Vedanta. This is directly related. Remember Vedanta, it's that branch of Hinduism that particularly is based on what's called the Upanishads. It's the greatest philosophical school, especially Advaita Vedanta, non-dual Vedanta. So this is to be found right there. It's one of the Upanishads talks about these very things. So those are three trinities, and I've just continued to observe them in Meher Baba's Darshana. Maybe there are other things as fundamental as this. If somebody points them out, I'd be interested in hearing about it, but I haven't seen anything else as important as this. But there is another fundamental principle, and it's a binary, and that is the microcosm and the macrocosm. And we've actually seen some of the basis for that yesterday with thinking the imagination. The body is the shadow, like the bodies we're in, right? They're the shadow of the Atma. This is God Speaks says this. And the universe, or the sphere, is the shadow of Paramatma, right? God, you know. So that's the microcosm and the macrocosm. So, you know, experience, which we, you know, is part of our existence, from the moment we were electrons at the beginning of the journey, all the way up to the sixth plane, for all those billions of years, continues to have this subject-object dichotomy. There's I am this, and there you and it is the objective universe that I experience. So this is that dichotomy, the microcosm through my body, I experience the macrocosm, which is the shadow of Paramatma. That's very fundamental to Meher Baba's Darshana also. There are other things that I could talk about, like opposites and so forth. There are other things, but for a presentation like this, that's probably more than enough to cover in one session, I think. Unless you guys get it like this and feel boring, we already know this, go on to the next thing.
I'm sorry, maybe I missed it. If you can roll it up a little bit. Did you talk about topic A? I was interested to know about the divine foundation of cosmic order.
Yeah, no, I'll be coming to that.
Okay.
I'll be starting out with
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
I haven't heard that before, so I was curious.
Yeah, so those will be our topics, okay? Everybody on board with this?
Ready.
All right, here we go. Yeah. I don't actually have very much to say on that first topic, except this, that all of these trinities, that is, all of this cosmic architecture. You see cosmic architecture? these define the cosmic architecture. Okay, let me say this. This trinity is going to turn out to be the basis for, you could say, space, or the structure of the different parts of the cosmos, as we'll see in a minute. This one, Creator, Preserver, Destroyer, is the basis for time, for transformation and change in time. And this third one, wakefulness, dream, and sound state, shapes the states that we experience, the states through which we experience space and time and everything else. It really pertains very directly to us. And of course, you know, microcosm, macrocosm is the very structure of experience itself. So all of these things have their basis in the nature of God. They are derived from that. God is the basis for the cosmic architecture. And I'll be bringing that out with all of these things. Okay. So let's go to the triune nature of God as creator, preserver, as knowledge, power, and bliss. Here. No, that's not the right. No, that one. Don't worry.
No, actually, it'd be nice if we explain it.
We just need to meditate now.
On my own.
Well, I passed on because I know you guys already know all that stuff. Yeah. So this is okay, I won't go to the shadows. I'll go to something else first. You will get to the shadows. But this is a good one. Okay, Baba characterized God's nature as comprised of knowledge, power, and bliss. And they are the nature of God, the triune nature of God. If you look at the 10th state of God chart and God speaks, you can see that when you actually get God realization, you get the experience of knowledge, power, and bliss. It's right there in the chart. And those are really, really fundamental.
Question here.
Yeah.
Question. What does it mean, the nature, the word using nature there, here, divine nature here? I know it means knowledge, power, bliss, but why do we call it the nature of God?
I know it's kind of hard to come up with a word, you know, that's more fundamental than nature to explain it by. The essence, the reality, the very existence of God.
Yeah, existence.
The root characteristic of it, yeah. The root character of God is knowledge, power, and bliss.
The way I think of it is, God can't help being.
Yeah, no,
Can't
that's
help but
right.
be this.
The very
It's his
being of God inevitably has these characteristics. Do you want to say something, Rosie?
Yeah, can you just explain exactly what the mental sphere incorporates?
Okay, we'll be coming to that next, or very soon, yeah. But bring up things if I haven't delved into it enough. I'm trying to think. David was questioning Sat Chit Anand.
Yes, I have one exhibit to present, which is in the Parvartika prayer. God is called both knowledge, power, and bliss, and he's also called the Trinity of truth, knowledge, and bliss.
Right.
And I mean, one could also look into what the Hindi version is, because that might be illuminating as well. Anyway, it's a question mark, that's all.
Yeah, I did actually pull this out from Wikipedia, but you can find it many other places.
Sure.
But anyway, this is, I feel that knowledge, power, and bliss, that trinity, as best I know, originates with Meherabode. But David was bringing up the question of Sat Chit Anand. If this were an audience of Indians, we could have another schism in the LA group. on this point, but probably in LA it would recede into the background. But it's Satchit Anand is a very, Sat Chit Anand. Have you heard that phrase? Satchit Anand. It's very, very fundamental to many schools of Indian thought. Vedanta certainly. They think God is Satchit Anand, and it is in fact the case that Baba does use Satchidanand to gloss, to interpret. Like these are some cases. He'll say, knowledge, power, bliss, parentheses, Satchidanand. That is true. But the problem that I have with it is that Sat does not mean power. It simply does not. I mean, any dictionary would say that. And Chit is consciousness, and I'm writing a book on this, and the relation between consciousness and knowledge is complex. They're related, but I think non-identical. So Satchidanand is actually most literally translated as we have here, existence. Like here are some of the definitions: absolute truth, reality, Brahman, unchangeable, that which has no distortion, that which is beyond distinctions of time, space, and person, that which pervades the universe in all constancy. It's not power,
I agree. And in Stay with God, Francis also uses existence, knowledge, bliss.
Yeah, I know. And Baba does too. I mean, it's actually a great trinity, and Baba does use that. You are the trinity of truth, knowledge, and bliss. Truth means existence, basically. Truth is that which is. Sat is actually derived from the Sanskrit verb astitva, which means to be. Anyway, so I'm going to bracket that question as a very complex and involved one, on which the LA group you can in next meeting decide whether you want to have a schism on this particular issue, or if you've got enough other issues to work
Well, can you bring the other slide, please?
Which one?
Before this. The
with.
page
Okay, I was
241.
showing this. This is
Page 241, you said. That was a good one, from God Speaks.
what?
The one that you, it was explaining about Satchidanand.
Okay, that just gives
This one.
that just gives examples, like, I am God, Satchidanand, with consciousness of duality. I am God, Satchidanand, or knowledge, power, bliss. So he does gloss it that way. There's no denying it. But the problem is, it doesn't mean that, literally speaking. Balna, too, was the one who pointed this out to me. And what Bal felt was that he was saying Baba was working with Muslim disciples. He probably meant Ghani and Ramju, to whom, I mean, any Indian would know these words. It's like existence, knowledge, bliss. What English speaker doesn't know what those words mean? But it wasn't an issue that was as pressing to their minds as it would have been to a Hindu, the Muslim background. So they just sort of used it, knowledge, power, bliss, Satchidanand, without giving attention to the matter. That's what he thought. So anyway, it's a big question. We can have, maybe I should come up with a list of the 101 leading topics on basis of which the Baba community can form schisms in the years ahead.
Get a head start.
Get a head start. And your board, the LA board, can sort of study them and say, which ones do we want to pick? By the way, I'll just throw this in, gratuitous. At one time, somebody asked Erich, what was Baba's outstanding characteristic as a man, right? This is in Mandalay Hall. And Erich would answer a question like that according to what came to him at the moment. But this day he said, Baba's outstanding characteristic was a sense of humor. Now, look at what he gave as an example of a sense of humor. He's saying, for example, Baba would be with the Mandalay here in Mandalay Hall, Meherabad, and he would feel that everything was a little bit too quiet. So the Kaka Barya would be there. Kaka was in charge of handing out supplies, soap, razor blades, stuff like that. And Baba said, but Kaka, what is this that I hear that you're not being fair and equitable in the way that you distribute supplies. And, what, Baba? Who said this? Well, you know who said it was the hated Baijul. Kaka and Baijul were enemies for 45 years. And
What they do?
huh?
Who they do?
Baijul.
By the
He's one of the Mandali,
Yeah.
also at Meherabad. And the thing is that Baijul did hard physical work, right? Much more than others did. So he felt that he actually needed more soap. You know, they wouldn't have enough soap to wash themselves, and they had to wash their clothes too. And the others, you know, would just bow, would just sit in his room and write, you know, no exercise. Whereas Baijul had to work like a dog and hunt musts, and so he actually needed some more soap. Whereas Kaka was giving the same amount to everyone. So that was his take on it, right? So they had a big fight, and they were shouting at each other, and Baba was enjoying it thoroughly.
I'm laughing.
And finally, Baba said, okay, enough. They had to totally stop. They had to embrace, and that was the end. So that was Baba's sense of humor.
Can I add something? You know, Esfandiar, who was such a beautiful soul,
Yeah.
once I asked him, you know, because he'd answer questions, if when he was a young boy, he experienced Baba's sense of humor, and he couldn't respond. Tears came down his face.
That was not,
That.
that was not their, what Baba showed them, yeah. For the
No. Baba showed them so much sense
Yeah.
of humor, but that's why he was crying.
Oh, I see.
It must have brought back memories of him.
Yeah. So,
Now,
anyway, maybe the LA group needs to do a renewed demonstration of its sense of humor. So I'm
We
just
need
giving
that.
you, I'm giving
I
you
know I
some
need
nice
that.
opportunities here.
Hey, it's
Yeah.
every day in our lives.
Keep us happy.
One more Eric story
Yeah.
about the nature, triune nature, knowledge, power, and bliss. Because, what did he say? Because.
Yeah, I was just gonna come to
Oh,
that, yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
I know, I'm psychic.
I've got to find this. His notebook has been scanned, and I think this is there somewhere, but I haven't been able to find it yet. But I remember Erich, okay, this is back to God's triune nature as knowledge, power, and bliss, okay? And Erich was, would say this, and one particular time made an impression. I was by no means sort of a central focus around Erich. I was always awestruck. I always wanted to say something clever, and I always felt like an idiot, you know. So I would just sit there like a bumpkin. But on this particular day, he got to this topic, and he looked right at me, and he said the whole thing to me. That was very unusual. But it turns out to be relevant. You know, Erich had new things, you know, to the work I'm doing. He read from something written down from Baba, and this very close to this. This is exactly the idea. The wording may be different, but because God exists, because God is existence, God knows everything, right? Makes sense. If he is everything, he's going to know what he is, right? Because God is existence, God knows everything. Because God knows everything, God can do everything. Infinite power, right? That makes sense. You know all the ways and means. And because God can do everything, God is all blissful. Because anything he wants, he can do. Right? So, you see, in these triune natures of God, this actually is, I would say, it's not a trivium, it's a tetrad.
Yeah.
Tetrad. Existence, knowledge, power, bliss.
Yeah.
Right?
I got you.
And the three spheres are dependent on the three, but God's existence is at the root of it all. So you see there's actually, let me just, since you're not getting enough obscure things, Neoplatonism. I don't know if you've heard of Neoplatonism. It's Plotinus is the great father of it. It's one of the great philosophical, foundation philosophically for Christianity, Judaism, Islam, all of them. In our Western world, there's a huge inheritance from it. Well, one of the ideas of Platonism was emanation. That is, from the reality of God, the created universe emanates, right? It's sort of like a shadows forth, you could say. Well, this is like emanation. God's existence is the cause of his knowledge. His knowledge is the cause of his power, and his power is the cause of his bliss. There's an order of dependency. Now, in the nature of God as such, these questions don't arise. They're all one, you know. Knowledge, power, bliss are one indissoluble unity. But as soon as they start to manifest themselves in the created world, you do get this order of dependency and order of emanation. Do you get that? Okay, let me explain this more. Thus, knowledge, God's nature as knowledge, has as its shadow the mental sphere. God's nature as power has as its shadow the subtle sphere, right? And God's nature as bliss has as its shadow the gross sphere.
Can you relate them?
Yeah, so let's look at that some more. But you followed the basic idea. And there is an order of dependency. The mental sphere obviously depends on the existence of God. Actually, the mental sphere is in the realm of illusion. Whereas the existence of God is in the realm of duality. But as soon as illusion starts to come into the picture, the mental sphere depends on God's existence. The subtle sphere, which is power, right? That's where power is manifested. Like the fourth plane, you have infinite power, is dependent on the mental sphere. And the gross sphere, which is the scene of bliss, that's the one that takes the most work to understand, is dependent on power. So there's an order of succession. Do you follow that idea?
Yes.
So even though knowledge, power, bliss are absolutely one in God's real state, when the creation comes into the picture, they manifest in an orderly succession one at a time, which is due to the natural relation between existence, knowledge, power, and bliss. An order of dependency. Are you following that? So here's the thing. We're talking about the structure of the cosmos. This is revealed to us by Meherabode. Science doesn't know this.
Yeah.
But Baba said there are three spheres, the mental sphere, the subtle sphere, and the gross sphere. And there really are three spheres. It's not just a way of understanding things. This is, I'll say, an empirical reality for those souls sufficiently advanced to see it. You know what empiricism is? Science is empirical. It's based on the study of what can be observed and experienced. You scientifically measure things. It's empirical science. But empirical actually refers to the world of experience. Like you're having empirical experience of this room and the open door outside and fans overhead. This is the empirical domain for us at this moment. Well, if you're on the sixth plane of a consciousness, these would be empirical realities for you. You would actually know the mental sphere because you directly see it. You would know the subtle sphere because you could remember it back when you were on the first, second, third, fourth planes. And you would remember the gross plane. In other words, these can be experienced by people sufficiently advanced.
When you say people who are, well, that was my question, and somehow I have an answer somewhere, but I want to know your opinion. When you say mental sphere, people who are in a sixth plane, and they are in mental sphere. The way that Baba actually explains it is that they are unconscious of subtle and gross world.
Yeah,
they're totally unconscious.
yeah.
And so one thing I like to share, which I read it in, Christina helped me, in Nothing and Everything, is that when we see the sixth planar, Baba says, when you see the sixth planar and you see them eating or sleeping and all that, they are not. It is something that you see through your gross eyes.
Yeah, I know.
It's very magnificent, I think.
No, that's true.
It's
So there
very
are, yeah, that is true. Rosie?
Does your mental sphere in this sense pertain to the sixth plane?
Fifth and sixth planes are together comprise the mental sphere. So if we're going to try to intuitively get a grasp on why that is a shadow of knowledge, right? Well, it kind of makes sense, right? Those are mental states, the emotional side of it and the thinking side of it. It kind of intuitively just makes sense that that would be a shadow of knowledge, right? Do we need to spend time on this? It's just, I mean, is anyone here on the fifth or sixth plane? Elaine is, okay.
Elaine is, yeah.
Okay,
I think David might be.
David is also.
David is asleep. So
But they're back.
maybe because he's experiencing sound sleep now, so he's there.
They're backbenchers, so they're not going to
Might
say
be
anything.
God.
They're going to listen to us, yeah.
Can you show a chart of the levels of consciousness, the planes of consciousness?
You know, I don't think I have it in this slideshow. I could show it. Yeah, God Speaks has such a chart.
I always, for
Yeah.
new people, just quickly, okay, these are the gross, this is the
Yeah,
subtle, and this is the mental. And then God.
yeah, I don't think I have it here. Well, there is this one, just to show it.
There you go.
There, blame him. Yeah, so these are the six planes. Yeah, this does show it actually. Yeah.
Where is that graphic?
This?
Is it in one of your books?
This is God Speaks.
Yes, and God speaks.
So the Ana Bhuvan is the gross plane. The Pran Bhuvan is the subtle plane, means sphere, subtle sphere. And the Manu Bhuvan is the mental sphere, right? So first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and then here's the seventh up there. By the way, Ana Bhuvan, you know what that means literally?
What language is that? Sanskrit?
Sanskrit, yeah. And so it refers to the gross plane.
Yeah, it's the food.
Ana
Yeah, it's the
means
food plane.
food.
Food.
It's the food plane. So I always think of like musts on the third plane, and they look down at the gross planes and they say, all they do is eat. Yeah, so these are the seven planes of Jupiter.
So how do you describe the subtle planes?
Okay, yeah, let's go back to that. Oops. Yeah, now the subtle plane, sphere plane, is the shadow of power. And when you read about it, you experience light, right, which would be pran, and you acquire powers. On the second plane, you can fill an empty well or make a dry tree bloom or stop a railway train and things like that.
But do they really, those second planar, I always was wondering, do they practice that? Do they do it like in
I was
Baba
talking to one guy who, and I believed what he was saying, who said that he did have the power to stop trains, and actually he would do it. He was taking a train to somewhere, and his house was midway between stations, and he would stop the train there. So, I mean, the temptation to be selfish about it. So,
Yeah.
but you know, on the fourth plane, Baba says you can raise the dead, actually, human beings, and you can create universes teeming with life, Baba said. You have the powers of God. So it does intuitively make sense to me that the subtle sphere would be the shadow of power, right? Doesn't it seem right? Yeah, did you want to say?
I had a conversation with a healer in Guatemala that I found a long time ago.
Yeah.
I called him to Skype and had a nice conversation. And he was pretty young, he was like about 30. And he told me that he was born with power, basically, right? Or experiences that he thought everybody had. That he said that he could go through walls. He could see walls, and he didn't care about walls. He can go through anything, like nothing, like that. It didn't exist.
Yeah.
But that was his experience until one day he realized that not everybody was capable of doing that.
Yeah, no, those powers are there. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I want to know, so like, we know the, mental spheres, those are the people in the mental planes.
Yeah.
Still 5 and physical spheres. And how does the mental body is different?
Okay, I'll come to that. I've just been talking about the spheres for now.
Spheres.
This actually is microcosm, macrocosm, tell the truth, which is part of our topic for today. Yeah.
Yeah, one more question. So this, all these natures, God's nature, knowledge, power, and bliss,
Yeah.
is this side of the Paran Akash on point, or still is on the other side? I'm sorry, I'm this side and that side.
No, that's good. The triune nature of God actually belongs to the domain of the reality.
Reality.
I should have in this slideshow the 10 states of God. I could pull up that chart if you want to take the time. But, you know, the beyond state of God is knowledge, power, bliss. And the beyond state is the realm of reality. But the spheres are not.
This side.
They are on this side of the dividing line. They're illusory. Thus, they are shadows. So the mental sphere is the shadow of God's nature as power. And the subtle sphere is the shadow, knowledge, I mean. And the subtle sphere is the shadow of God's nature as power. And this is a point, maybe a good stage to say this right now, that it's not like in the mental sphere and the gross sphere, we're completely unconscious of thoughts and feelings. We have them, right? And but we don't experience them directly. This is not the direct scene of manifestation of thoughts and feelings. We get them indirectly. Whereas people on the mental planes would, like if, you know, I were on the mental planes, I wouldn't be seeing your physical faces. I'd be seeing, Sarah in the mental fifth plane, I'd see bodies of thoughts, you know. And I would see your thoughts and a mass of seething, swirling thoughts and this coming out. I mean, I'm imagining, I don't have that experience. I remember Yogananda describing something sort of like this. So he was, okay, Nait Khan was fifth plane, so that's what they would directly see. They wouldn't see your physical face at all. They would see your thoughts in the sixth plane.
What a mess.
Yeah, what a mess, yeah. So,
I always thought
in that sense, the mental sphere is the direct scene of manifestation of thoughts and feelings, that is God's nature as knowledge. And the subtle sphere is the direct scene of manifestation of God's nature as power. Now, people on the mental plane can get things done if they want to. But Baba did say on the fifth and sixth plane, you can't use those miraculous powers anymore. They're not accessible to you. You can get it done. It's like if you're the CEO of some huge corporation, right? And you need to, you know, get somebody to do something. You just tell some underling, some slave to do it, and they do it. You can get it done, but you don't do it yourself. So that's the same case. Power is not in the remit, the direct duties, the direct portfolio of people on the mental plane. They don't directly experience it, whereas people on the subtle planes do. What I'm trying to do here is, you know, just think about why it is appropriate that these would be the shadow of God's triune nature, right? Now, the most one that takes most thinking about, to me it's very, very obvious because I've been thinking about this so long, but why would the gross sphere be the shadow of bliss? And this is what I think about that. In all of these cases, in the mental sphere, you don't experience knowledge with a capital K. You experience a pair of opposites. Knowledge with a small k and ignorance. Not, you know, like, I don't know the route to Charlie's house. I'm ignorant. Whereas Charlie does know the route to Charlie's house. You see, opposites, knowing and not knowing. That's how knowledge manifests on the mental plane. Similarly, in power, you know, I can lift this computer mouse. I can't lift the refrigerator, right? I'm powerful and I'm powerless. So on the mental plane, I don't know. I'm in the second plane. I can fill an empty well, but I can't raise the dead, right? Power and powerlessness. It manifests as a pair of opposites. You get the idea? So bliss manifests as happiness and suffering. In India, the bhajans, as David might experience, sukh dukh. They talk about sukh dukh all the time. Sukh is happiness, dukh is unhappiness. So it just seems obvious to me that the gross plane is the most immediate scene of manifestation of sukh dukh. Like somebody cut my foot off. Agony, right? The physical agony is sort of the most direct emblem, or else it's not time yet where this will appeal. Say we're at 12 o'clock, lunch. Or, you know, having sex. If some of us, you know, we'd have to go back 50 years before the full power of that would hit us. But, you know, so it's like, I do think that bliss, happiness and suffering, to me it makes sense that the gross sphere, it's not that you don't experience those things in the subtle sphere, in the mental sphere. You do. In the same way that you experience knowledge and ignorance, and and you experience power and powerlessness on the gross plane. But the scene of manifestation is the gross. That's how it makes sense to me. But in any case, I would assert these as spiritual facts because Baba has said this. This is directly said by Baba. That these are the shadows. So thus you saw how knowledge, power, and bliss, existence, knowledge, power, bliss. There's an order of dependency, right? There's an order of descent. In the same way, the spheres, there's an order of descent. Yeah, the thoughts and feelings, when they descend further, they gain power, like on the subtle spheres, as desires with power. And then they manifest on the gross sphere. There's an order of descent. So you see the power of this idea, right? Knowledge, power, bliss. I mean, I don't know, if you're students of philosophy, this would really, loom large. Knowledge, power, bliss is the basis for the cosmic order. Yeah.
So, Ward, on one hand, we know that people who are in mental sphere, they're unconscious of subtle and gross sphere. At least that's what Bob says.
No, that's right.
Okay. So, you're saying that they have a thoughts and feeling exclusively. That's the characteristics of fifth and sixth plane. But also you're saying that they have access to power as well as bliss.
Well, I would say indirectly.
Indirectly.
Their experience of thoughts and feelings is direct. Their access to power and happiness, suffering is indirect. And in the same way, on the subtle sphere, your experience of power is direct, whereas thoughts, feelings, happiness, bliss is indirect. And in the gross sphere, happiness and misery are direct experiences, whereas we don't directly experience power. We use it. We might feel, oh, I'm full of zip and go today. I've got lots of, my pran must be in good shape, right? But do you actually experience the pran immediately? Do you see the pran as immediately as like I see Margaret's face? No, we don't have that experience. But on the subtle plane you would. You would actually see the light. Baba has described this, actually.
So continuing, I'm sorry, so when you are in, let's say you're in a subtle plane, can you step
I don't want to
out of
get...
it and go to the gross? I mean, can
No,
you move between your bodies?
I don't want to get into this
Oh,
too
okay.
much because I want to stick on the triune
Okay.
nature of God, and these are complex topics.
Can I
Yeah.
make a comment? I think once somebody's in the mental sphere, power and bliss on the shadow, which is subtle and gross, those two planes or sections become vehicles for the mental, or can be vehicles.
Or the
mediums,
shadows. Yeah.
Or mediums for the mental sphere.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a mental plane saint, you can get things done in the subtle sphere and the gross sphere. You certainly can. You just don't directly do it yourself. It's, you see, let's not spend too much time on what the experience of these people is, because for one thing, it would be a big help if we had someone who actually was experiencing those things. But if you're on the mental plane, the subtle and the gross have disappeared for you because they are less real than you are. For example, if you're walking across the room, do you fuss about your shadow? Do you think about, oh, is my shadow following? Oh, I hope it doesn't. No, you don't even think about it. So if on the mental plane, the subtle and the gross, you know those are not real. You know from experience. Yeah.
So for me, Baba makes it very, very clear. Sanskaras determine experience.
Yeah.
Okay? So if you have gross sanskaras, you experience the gross sphere.
Yeah.
We wear them out, and when they are sufficiently worn out, you begin to settle the next state, experience the subtle.
Yeah.
The gross sphere goes away. You can't
no,
hear
it vanishes.
it.
You don't have any access
Your five
to it.
senses don't count. There
Yeah.
are different senses on those spheres.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
right.
pretty clear. Same with the mental.
Yeah. So now here is part of I want to go into this is my own meditations on this. You see, the thing is, Baba says knowledge, power, and bliss are the triune nature of God. And it seems to be really true that God's natures really are those three. They're not two and they're not four. For example, if Baba were to say, hey Ward, come up with some more natures of God, I would say, well, God's beautiful, beauty, isn't that a nature of God? And how about God's majesty and glory, his Jalal aspect? Oh, majesty, there's a fifth. And God's tranquil, peaceful, right? Peace. Shanti is a sixth. We could go on adding them, but apparently the natures of God really are those three and not those other things. I don't know what they are. Aspects or attributes or something. But when he says there are three natures, there really are three. And the empirical evidence for this is that there really are three spheres. There aren't four, there aren't six, there aren't more. When you get to the gross, that really is the bottom of the line. Even when you're, at the very beginning of your journey, as stone form, you're actually experiencing the gross, in a very limited way, but it is the gross. So there truly are three spheres because there truly are three natures. Not four, not five, not six, not eight.
Just because Cassandra talked about sanskara.
Listen, let's not get into experience too much.
No, not experience.
I want to
but-
really talk about
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah.
Maybe we can talk about it.
because this afternoon we'll start talking
Yeah.
about the path and things
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that. And I haven't gotten into sanskaras really.
Yeah.
We'll never get through our subject if we
Right.
follow down all the fascinating lines of
Yeah.
that we could follow on this. Should we just hold up for a minute? So this is a meditation on the nature of these three and why there are just three and not more. I mean, I think it's an empirical fact there are three because Baba has told us so. I feel Baba's Darshana is based on revelation,
Yes.
not empirical science, because the God-man has told us so. When he says something, well, he knows. Okay, that's my point of view anyway. You can approach this as you like. But I'm think about this, okay? God knowledge in its nature projects an object, right? Knowledge seeks to know something. It naturally does that, isn't that true? The idea of knowledge, knowing without knowing something, is incomplete, right? So I know about the American Civil War. That's the object of my knowledge. Or I know where my wallet is, right? Or I know what my little finger is doing. So I know something. Knowledge naturally relates itself to an object. The very idea of knowledge contains that as a possibility. You could say there are three elements. There's the knower, there's the knowing, and the known. Knowledge implies, doesn't that make sense to you guys?
Yeah.
Yes.
It implies all of that. Okay, so knowledge is naturally going to project an object, which will be the subtle sphere, as a matter of fact. Power also naturally relates to an object, because what's the point of my having power if I don't exercise it with relationship to something? It's not complete, right? Power wants to express itself by showing itself. So like I'm Babe Ruth, and I hit the baseball out of Yankee Stadium, right? Well, there's the baseball flying off. That's the object of my power. Or I'm Joseph Stalin, and I express my power by killing lots and lots of people, right? Power naturally seeks to express it. The idea of an object is inherent in the very idea of power, right? Doesn't that make sense?
Yes.
But now what about bliss? Bliss doesn't have an object. When I'm blissful, I just sit back and am blissful. You don't bliss something. You are blissful. Bliss in its nature is the end. It's the stopper. Now, if I'm a selfless servant, I can run around trying to make others happy, like, true happiness. But in its own nature, bliss, once you bliss, it's inert. I always say it's the couch, among the three natures of God, bliss is the couch potato. The other two are doing stuff, but bliss ends it in its nature. Thus it is that in the descent, the gross sphere stops the descent, because the nature of bliss is that way. And in the ascent, bliss stops it for most people too. Most people get bliss. They don't bother about power and knowledge. Mukti means bliss. I feel this is the nature of bliss. It ends it. So the nature of the material sphere, matter, is it doesn't do anything unless it is acted upon by energy, something like that. This is just my own meditation on why there are three spheres and no more. It has to do with the very nature of the triune nature of God. To me, this makes sense anyway. So this is an understanding that the avatar of the age has given us. And it's very, very powerful and very, very revelatory. As I don't think most Baba lovers even think about these things very much, but I'll just say, Meherabad's Darshana is fantastic, actually. The power, and he just flipped these things out here and never bothered to. I always think of Baba, the avatar. If Baba were a philosopher, he would come up with, say, one of 100 ideas like this, because he had a lot of them. And he would write 40 books on it and become the super hyper distinguished professor of this and that, and getting doctorates from every university, and would pontificate until he was 202 years old, and everybody would worship and admire him. But that's what a professor would do. But Baba was not that. I think of him as not a millionaire, not a billionaire, not a trillionaire, a quadrillionaire. And he would, you know, like stroll into a neighborhood and reach into his pocket, take out a big handful of emeralds and diamonds and rubies and sapphires and just toss them out there and walk on. And most people look at them and say, oh, look at those nice marbles, aren't they pretty? Baba gave them, we should keep them. Our archivists will keep them. But then, you know, 100 years later, people look at them and say, this is a stunning emerald of unbelievable worth. We're in the age where we kind of look at them like nice little marbles. But in the future, people will understand the worth of these things that Baba gave. He never developed it. He never explained it very much. He's got to leave people who come along later with something to do. So people who come, like, I'm one of the people doing this, and in the future we're going to get the superstars like Ibn Arabi and Shankara, the big, as I say, this is amateur hour. This is kids' playtime. So, but the things Baba gave were of incredible power, and this is one of them. Knowledge, power, bliss. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment on gross sphere, bliss. I think this, way to me is beautiful, because even though they're doing the supposedly the lowest part,
Yeah.
you can experience bliss.
Yeah, that's right. It's a shadow of bliss.
So it's incredible, because you might be in the mental sphere, but you're away from bliss in a way.
That's true.
So
Hey, you mental sphere guys. We got our thing too. Yeah. You think you're hot shots, but we got access to bliss like you don't. No, it's true. I mean, actually, it is true. The lowest is also a manifestation of a nature of God. God is everywhere. So here are some, there are a lot of quotes of Baba's, and in a longer session in Meherabode we'll spend a lot more time on this, but here are some of Baba's comments on this. The Everything and the Nothing is a very good book for short, sweet statements of some of these ideas. So this is the Everything and the Nothing. God has, here he calls them aspects actually, 3 infinite aspects: knowledge, power, bliss. By the way, Baba was consistent on this from the 1920s through to the 1960s. He always had these 3. It is from these that man derives his 3 finite aspects of mind, energy, matter. Right? That's mental sphere, subtle sphere, gross sphere. The 3 aspects of God are interlinked, and this is what I was talking about before. Bliss depends on power, and power depends on knowledge, right? We've already gone over this.
Yeah.
Similarly, the 3 aspects of man are interlinked. Matter depends on energy, and energy depends on mind. As a human being, you are one homogeneous entity of these 3 finite aspects: mind, energy, power. And I take one homogeneous entity. In other words, they're all sort of muddled and mushed up together in most of us. We think, we act, we are happy or miserable, and it's all a jumble. So one homogeneous entity, which are but the shadows of the 3 infinite aspects of God: knowledge, power, bliss. So this is a very good, simple statement of this idea. God Speaks has some, okay, I'll read a little bit from God Speaks. This is from that, God Speaks has 10 chapters, right? And the 8th chapter is almost half the book. And it's, by common consensus, the most difficult part. And in the early pages, not right at the very beginning is about the everything and the nothing, but after that, Baba has 10 or 15 pages where he talks about knowledge, power, bliss. It's probably the most important treatment of that topic in Baba's writing. God Speaks, chapter 8. So this is from there. In short, when the most finite nothing, you remember that from yesterday, the everything and the nothing, gets projected as nothingness, remember the nothingness, through the most finite creation point, which is also in the infinity pervaded by the infinite triune nature of God. So the infinite triune nature of God pervades the first manifestation within the created order of things. Even when you're an atom, you're pervaded by knowledge, power, bliss. That trinity is there in a very compressed form, closely linked with and upheld by the all-pervading infinite triune nature of God, gradually expands ad infinitum and manifests apparently as infinite nothingness or as infinite creation. So the thing is, right from the very beginning of our spiritual journey, when Rosie was, I'm going to say a uranium atom, when you were a hydrogen atom, just right from the start, you're pervaded by infinite knowledge, power, bliss, right from the start. But knowledge, power, and bliss, being of the nature of God, want to expand and express themselves fully within the domain of illusion. This is illusion now. So that is part of the driving force that leads to the growth and expansion of consciousness. So you expand your knowledge, power, and bliss through the evolutionary series. So this is part of the cause of evolution and involution. I don't know, do you get that idea? In other words, it's right there from the beginning because God is knowledge, power, and bliss. And it can't help but be there at every stage of our journey. So this is one statement from God Speaks. I'm going to go on, but these are, well worth reading. Here's another important treatment of this. The triple, I'll read the sentence. Although these aspects of the finite basis of the triple nature of man, the mind, the energy, and the body, typifying happiness. So Baba is explicitly linking the gross, the body, with happiness to kind of make the point, knowledge, power, bliss, right? Happiness is a finite aspect of bliss. And he keeps doing that because the other two are easier to get. The mind being a shadow of knowledge is kind of intuitively obvious, and the subtle sphere being a shadow of power is intuitively obvious. But the body and bliss takes the most thinking through. So anyway, this is another good treatment of this topic, pages 84 to 85 to 86, actually.
What version?
You have to get the second edition, third printing.
Oh, third printing.
Otherwise,
We
the
don't
page
have that.
numbers will be different.
Yeah.
Yeah. You'll have to find it for yourself if you get some other version of it. And I don't think I have, I should put this, okay, I'm going to go to another slideshow where this is, because this is helpful, I think. Let me see, collected diagrams, here we go. Where is this going to be? No. Yeah, this is from God Speaks. And actually this shows the, the question arose a minute ago about the body and the sphere, right? I was talking about the sphere. Baba says in the first chapter of God Speaks, page 4, that the body is the shadow of the Atma, and the sphere is the shadow of Paramatma. This is actually microcosm, macrocosm, right? So remember that the Atma is the soul, and Paramatma is God, right? And the crucial idea in non-dualism, in Advaita, which Baba is an Advaitin, is that the Atma and the Paramatma are one and the same. I am God, right? We were talking about this yesterday. So the shadow of the I part of it, the Atma, is the body. And the shadow of the God part of it, I am God, the Paramatma, is the sphere, right? So we have these two shadows, the small shadow and the big shadow. You follow this? The small shadow, I mean, we experience this. The small shadow is your body. And we all experience our body as being smaller than the universe, right? So the universe is the big shadow. This is thinking the imagination also. We talked about it in that context yesterday. So this is a chart where Baba is explaining the relationship between them. Through the body, you experience the universe. So man, you have to read this like a grammatical sentence. That's how to read this part of this chart. Man is gross conscious through the gross body, which is the small gross shadow, right? It's the shadow of Paramatma. Is conscious through the gross body of the gross sphere, which is the big gross shadow, which is the gross nothing, which is nothing into nothing into nothing. Now, this, I think, could make sense now. Remember that the gross is the shadow of the subtle, and the subtle is the shadow of the mental, right? So nothing into nothing into nothing.
Yeah.
The mental has the dignity of being the nothing. And the subtle is nothing into nothing. And the gross is nothing into nothing into nothing. It's three removes. It's the shadow of the shadow of the shadow, right? I mean, look at what is in this chart. There's a hell of a lot in this chart, actually. So now we have man is subtle conscious through the subtle body, is the small gross, small subtle shadow. It's the subtle shadow of the Atma. Is conscious through the subtle body of the subtle sphere equals the big subtle shadow equals the subtle nothing. Subtle nothing equals nothing into nothing. Because the subtle is the second shadow. The subtle is the shadow of the mental. Are you following this? Right? And now we get to the mental. I'm actually doing a simplified treatment of this chart. Man is mental conscious through the mental body, which is the small mental shadow, is conscious of the mental sphere, which is the big mental shadow, which is the mental nothing, which is nothing. We finally got into nothing. After nothing into nothing into nothing. So through the body, thus, is the shadow of the Atma. That question came up earlier, body and sphere, which is actually, one of the other topics here. But going back to this once again. So this is the body of the individual Jivatma, which is the shadow of the Atma. And this is the sphere of creation, which is the shadow of Paramatma. So we have microcosm, macrocosm, and in both of those domains, we have an order of descent from the mental to the subtle to the gross. Okay? Yeah?
Now somebody, we want to go path to God. So if you are on a gross body, so we
Yeah.
need to do the bhakti mark, correct? We don't need to worry about.
We'll get to that this afternoon. Yeah. No, but these are directly related to the triune nature of God, but just because you're gross conscious doesn't mean you can't do karma yoga or jnana yoga. Those options are all there.
What does MARG stand for?
Marg means path. This will be where we start this afternoon, these three paths. Gyan Marg, Karma Marg, Bhakti Marg. Knowledge path, action path, devotion path. Those are the three. And Baba, I put them in this chart because they are linked to knowledge, power, and bliss. This is a tremendously illuminative idea that Baba has given. Knowledge, power, bliss. You see the consequences of it? They're all over the place. It really creates an enormous coherency in the understanding. Huh?
I think, I don't know if I just realized that nothing, he says nothing into nothing into nothing, right? That's what he says.
That's the gross.
So yeah, basically that's the gross. So you have three nothings on the gross, two nothings on the power, and only you have to deal with three nothings. Then
Yeah.
two nothings and then one nothing.
Yeah.
And nothing
actually-
becomes capital letter nothing.
Yeah, actually that nothing that is the mental sphere is actually a false nothing.
Still,
You've got to get to
I
the
mean,
real
one.
nothing, which is
Oh,
nirvana.
capital
This is
N,
one
yeah.
nothing. That is.
You might think,
it's nothing.
I'll flip in a stupid joke on this. I heard this about, there's a Jewish temple, and the chief rabbi of the entire district with a lesser rabbi are visiting the temple. And they've completed their work, and the lesser rabbi goes up to the altar and says, "Oh God, you are so great, and I'm nothing. I'm just merely nothing. Please have mercy on me and help me to serve and please you." So the chief rabbi says that. He says, "Oh God, you are so great and magnificent. I'm not even nothing. I am the nothing of nothings. I am the most worthless of all nothings. I am beneath nothing even. Please have mercy upon me and help me to please you." And so they go to the back of the room and are chatting. And meanwhile, the janitor comes out, doesn't see them, and he goes up to the altar and says, "Oh God, please help me to be your faithful servant and to serve you properly and to love you and to please you." And the chief rabbi says to the second rabbi, "Well, look who thinks that he's nothing." There's unfortunately a lot of truth in that. Okay. No, I had something else I wanted to say. Yes, let me just show some of these other charts which will summarize some of this. God's nature as knowledge corresponds to the mental sphere as macrocosm and the mental body as microcosm. Right? You get that? The microcosm means the body is the shadow of the Atma, and the macrocosm means the sphere is the shadow of Paramatma, or God. Through the body we experience the shadow of the universe. God's nature as power corresponds to the mental sphere as macrocosm, and the subtle body as microcosm. God's nature as bliss corresponds to the gross sphere as macrocosm and the gross body as microcosm. So this is summarizing what we've been going over so far.
Very nice.
Yeah. Did you want to?
I think most of us don't think about the fact that we actually have a subtle body and a mental body. But we're not aware of them as our focus. There's still stuff going on there.
Yeah.
It's not like, you have a gross body and then when you outgrow the gross body, you go to the mental body. They work together, the three of them. There's
Yeah.
a synergy there.
Baba called it one homogeneous entity.
Yeah.
It's all mushed up together.
Yeah.
So I mean, we're aware that we have thoughts.
Are you going to touch on that, on wakefulness?
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
going to come up.
We're
I'm
gonna
also
go
on the
to that.
first Trinity.
Yeah.
So this is summarizing, again, existence, the downward processional of the divine natures and spheres. Existence, because God is existence, God knows everything, knowledge. And because God knows everything, God can do everything, that's power. Because God can do everything, God is blissful. Knowledge, whose shadow is the mental sphere, power, whose shadow is the subtle sphere, and bliss, whose shadow is the gross sphere. Again, this is summarizing what we've been going over until this point. Yeah. Okay. Let's turn to Ishwar.
My favorite.
Yeah.
He is the favorite.
And this topic, the fullest treatments of it are to be found in Infinite Intelligence. Really says a lot about it. Particularly, they're called series, not chapters, particularly series 9 and 10. You'll really find a lot about Ishwar there. And also in God Speaks. God Speaks doesn't use the word Ishwar. But in God Speaks you will find creator, preserver, destroyer, or emanator, sustainer, dissolver. And one major locus in God Speaks is the 9th chapter, which is called the 10 States of God. The 3rd state of God is this exactly. It's the, in fact, I haven't even shown this yet. Yeah, here we are. This is the 10 States of God chart. Yeah, I was mentioning, you see knowledge, power, bliss. Those are right there in the 2nd state of God. Baba emphasizes that the beyond state is knowledge, power, bliss. So it's there for all 3 states, A, B, and C.
B and C. It's been conscious and unconscious.
Yeah, but it's unconscious, but it's there nonetheless.
Yeah.
Here it is, all 3 of these. But here we are in the 3rd state of God. God is emanator, sustainer, and dissolver. Or you could say creator, preserver, and destroyer. Or in Hinduism, it would be Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh. Those 3 terms. Dattatreya is the name. In fact, I'm going to show you Dattatreya since I've mentioned it several times now. Oops. This is how Dattatreya gets represented. You see those 3-headed here. I have another page with this. Yeah, here we are. So you can see that's what that is. You see, this is the trident, that's Shiva, whose characteristic thing. A lot of the postures and the things they hold are traditionally identified with Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh. Narayan Maharaj, one of Baba's masters, was a devotee of Dattatreya. So this idea of Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, creator, preserver, destroyer, is traditional within Hinduism. So in Infinite Intelligence, Ishwar is consistently represented as the combination of Brahma, creator, Vishnu, preserver, and Mahesh, destroyer. This corresponds to the 3rd state of God in God Speaks, though the term Ishwar is never used in God Speaks. In Hinduism, this trinity is often represented as the god Dattatreya, who was worshipped by the perfect master, Narayan Maharaj. Mahesh, Brahma is the creator, Vishnu is the preserver, Shiva is another name for the 3rd, and Mahesh is a compound of Maha, great, and Ishwar. won't go into Advaita. But yeah, so Ishwar, we could really spend a long time on the word Ishwar, but do be conscious of this. In infinite intelligence, Baba uses the word Ishwar to mean creator, preserver, destroyer. He's quite rigorous in having it mean that in infinite intelligence. But if you read in Hindu literature generally, it's not limited to that. It just means God or personal God. So if you read about Ishwar, just reading about Hinduism, you can't assume it's creator, preserver, destroyer in the way that Baba uses it. Just a warning about that. Here are some of the characteristics of, actually this is how Baba depicts Ishwar, or how Dot Lesnick, our artist, depicted Ishwar in infinite intelligence at the left hand of the Sadguru. Okay, Ishwar as the third state of God creates and preserves and destroys everything. From the standpoint of God's creatures, like us, Ishwar is the same as God. God, Ishwar knows everything, has all power to do everything. We would not see the difference at all. It's personal God to us. But actually, Ishwar does not have the I am God experience. It's a surprising thing. Ishwar knows absolutely everything about the creation and can do absolutely everything within creation and is infinitely responsive to everything and everyone. But Ishwar does not experience I'm God. It's a strange thing. This is very explicit in infinite intelligence all over the place, and God says it too, about the third state of God. So if we were to compare Baba's Darshana on this point, I won't spend much time on this, but in say Christianity or Judaism or Islam, God as creator is a very big idea, right? They don't have the idea that that's linked to preserver and destroyer. It is in Hinduism, and Baba has it. And also in the Abrahamic religions, they would find unacceptable the idea that the creator doesn't have self-knowledge, doesn't have the I am God experience. So this is a difference in Baba's account of these things. Also, whenever Baba talks about these three, emanator, sustainer, dissolver, by the way, this is the second on the board here, the triune actor, I'm using this term for it. Baba always stresses that we don't have three separate aspects of God. Creator and preserver and destroyer are different functions of one aspect of God. They are linked with each other, and one inevitably leads to another. It's not like, Brahma. I always think, with archiving, which is all about preservation, right? And they have a big archive facility in India, and I always think they should have a statue there of Dattatreya, the three-headed God, Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, and the preserver, Vishnu, is beaming, because this is an archiving preserver, whereas Brahma and Shiva say, hey, why does he get all... I'd like to create some nice fungus and mold in this archiving facility. And Shiva says, yeah, man, and then I can destroy the archival object. But nope, they don't get any scope in the archiving thing. But it's not like that. The three are inexorably linked with each other, necessarily. And Baba explains it this way. When God creates, when one creates, one does so in the presumption that what you create will be preserved, right? If you create something and the instant you created it, it vanishes, well, what good did your creation do? So creation presupposes the preservation of what is created. But why do you preserve? Because you're trying to prevent it from being destroyed. But in the very act of preserving, you are presupposing that destruction will follow at some point, right? So the one leads to the other, necessarily and inexorably. And this is the basis for time, actually. Time, I'll come back to that in a minute. But Baba, in Infinite Intelligence, I'm just giving a very short treatment of this topic here. You know, it's a very big one. But Baba, in Infinite Intelligence, relates this to the process of waking up and going to sleep. And this diagram shows that. And this will illustrate how all... By the way, there was a big school of theology in the 18th century in Europe called deism. I don't know if you've heard of deism. But what deism is, an idea of God is, in the very beginning, God created everything. And he set it up perfectly so that it would play itself out. And then God just sat back and watched it, and everything has played itself out on its own without any interference from God. They always say some of the founding fathers were deists and so forth. Well, this is anything but deism. It turns out that Brahma Vishnu Mahesh, Ishwar, is intimately involved in everything. Every instant of our experience depends on the involvement of Ishwar. You could not go from one moment to the next without Ishwar being totally doing it all, actually. And this is one little illustration of it. This is a section of Infinite Intelligence, Series 10, where Baba talks about the cycle of waking up and going to sleep. You know, that's the third trinity we're talking about here. And Baba goes through this, right, you guys know what that is, right? You know, go sound sleep at night. And Baba said, coming out of sound sleep, you necessarily have to go through dream state, even if it's only for a moment. And then after dream state, you come to full wakefulness of the gross sphere for those unfortunate ones among us who are gross conscious. And then when you're going to sleep, you pass through dream and go back to sound sleep. Okay, this is a universal human experience. Well, Baba says it's not just human. Every single jivatma goes through this. Even stones do. Even, now it seems like they're pretty well asleep when they're wide awake, people like me. But he goes through, there's a whole section of this where he goes through this process, and he does it twice. I always like to bring up my favorite rock, who I call Rocky. So he goes through it in the case of Rocky, and then he goes through it again in the case of a human being. And the obvious point is that it would, all jivatmas between those two do the same thing. Everybody in evolution does it. And this is the process that happens as it is described. I won't read the passages, but I'll just explain them. Okay, in the original state, unconscious parameshwar is the term Baba used. This is the beyond state of God, which, you know, if you feel so moved, this would be a good moment to conduct some researches into the beyond state. Like to check it out and see what Parameshwar is like. Okay, but then Rocky, I'm going to use the case of a rock here. Rocky is sound asleep and in the unconscious Parameshwar state. And this is a complicated thing, so I'll just give it simple. In Infinite Intelligence, Baba talks about the gross and subtle spheres. He doesn't talk about the mental. And subtle encompasses the whole 6 planes of consciousness. Okay, so just that's the use of the term there. You don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
So we have the gross and subtle spheres, and then you have God, let's
I'm
say.
sorry, 6, subtle covers the 6th plane of consciousness?
All 6 are part of
I
the
thought
subtle.
from
Not
4
in
to
God's
7,
speech.
no?
This is an infinite intelligence.
Yeah.
The term subtle means the entire inner world from the first to the
Good
sixth.
that you said, because I always thought that he means subtle and mental together.
That's there in God Speaks, but in Infinite Intelligence, Baba used the word subtle as it was used in those days. You know, in Vedanta and Theosophy, they use subtle to mean the whole inner world. So he used the word that way. You don't have to worry about it. It's just the use of the word. Okay? So, before Rocky, Baba said that the dream state, this is actually going into the third of our trinities here, the dream state is the subconscious experience of the subtle. I know that, don't worry, Baba said elsewhere, it's the astral. Let's just sort of bracket that off for the time being. But Baba said, you experience subconsciously the subtle in the dream state, right? But how can you experience the subtle sphere if the subtle sphere does not exist? Now, this again is another big question, the universalization of the individual. But Baba is implying that when Rocky is asleep, the subtle sphere does not exist for him, right? So, what do you do about that? Well, Ishwar leaps into action, and Brahma creates the subtle sphere. But what good does it do to create the subtle sphere if it disappears the instant it is created? It doesn't do any good at all. So Brahma comes into the picture and preserves the subtle sphere. Vishnu comes in and preserves the subtle sphere. The stage having been set, Rocky, which means actually in infinite, it means the realizer. Remember creating and realizing from yesterday? Some of you remember that? So this is, creating is a shorthand for create, preserve, destroy, actually, which is what Ishwar does. Ishwar has created and preserved the subtle sphere, and now Rocky realizes it. Now what realize means is Margaret, the rock, can I make you a rock for a moment? Looks at a rock form and says, that looks like me. And she realizes her rock body, and through the medium of that rock body, realizes the sphere, right? Remember, through the body you experience the sphere. We were just talking about that. So Rocky realizes the subtle sphere in dream state. So now we've got a Rocky who is dreaming, but it's not enough. You've got to wake up. You've got to have a day in the life of a stone. You've got to get all the way down to the gross sphere, or else you're not a proper stone. So, but there's no gross sphere, right? Well, Ishwar leaps into action again, and Brahma creates the gross sphere, right? But what good does it do? It's like you've got to hold it in place if you're going to realize it. It has to be held in place, right? So Vishnu, Ishwar as Vishnu, it's always Ishwar doing this. Ishwar as Brahma creates the subtle sphere, and now Ishwar as Vishnu gross sphere, preserves the gross sphere, and now Rocky can realize the gross sphere, and now Rocky is awake, as much as a rock is ever awake. I mean, there's not very much consciousness there, but as much as it's enough consciousness for there to be stones for us to walk on, you know, it has an empirical reality for rocks and for us. So now Rocky is realizing the gross sphere through a gross body. Okay. Well, I think probably 12 hours is a good day of work for Rocky. So, you know, sun is setting, You know, it's been, how hot is it supposed to get today? I heard 95 or something.
Nice.
And you know, when you're a rock, that's, you know, tough. Get heated up, you probably go up to 130 if you're in a nice place. So it's time to go to sleep. Well, for that to happen, Shiva or Mahesh has to destroy the gross sphere. This happens to us. You can't go to sleep if Shiva does not destroy the gross sphere for you. If you're not going to sleep, blame it on Shiva. Or else offer a prayer to Shiva. And once Shiva has destroyed the gross sphere, Rocky can't go on realizing it, right? Because it's not there anymore. So naturally, Rocky reverts back to the dream state which underlay the gross. The subtle, the gross is dependent on the subtle, right? So now Rocky starts to dream again. And this, now it's time for a good, I think if you're a rock, you need 12 hours. What do you think? Any opinions on this? You need a good 12 hours. Okay, so now Mahesh or Shiva destroys the subtle sphere and Rocky reverts to the sound sleep state again. So this was a day in the life of Rocky. Baba in Infinite Intelligence goes through this whole cycle once for stones and once for human beings. The clear implication is that every Jivatma in creation does this. These three states are universal. If you're a Jivatma, you have these three states as part of a daily cycle. And now, look at how much involved Ishwar is in this, right? You couldn't wake up and go to sleep without Ishwar. Ishwar is doing it all. As a matter of fact, and I would have to spend a lot more time to really flesh this point out, I'll say this, in Vedanta, the Atma doesn't do anything. All the Atma does is witness. There's a term sakshin for it, a witness consciousness. I think this is most rigorously understood the case with Baba's Darshana also. The Atma doesn't actually do anything. All of it gets done by Ishwar, actually. Creating, preserving, destroying, putting, I know I haven't talked about sanskaras and we won't get to it in this 2-day version, but in response to the sanskaras, Ishwar is creating all these scenes before us and preserving them. And what we do is we experience them. And we spend our sanskaras and get lots of new ones. It's always a good idea, in my opinion, for every one sanskara you spend to pick up at least 2.
Or 10.
Or 10, yeah.
You know, I have to record you explaining this chart.
Uh-huh.
Because I always understand it when you explain it, but whenever I sit down with that chart,
Yeah.
I have spent hours trying.
Mahesh just takes it over.
It just takes over. I can't
Yeah.
get through it. This is the hardest thing.
Yeah, no, this is actually quite an important
Yeah,
chart
it's very-
and explanation of Baba's. I don't think we could ever have understood this if Infinite Intelligence didn't
Yeah.
give it. Yeah. So this is the daily cycle of every Jivatma is totally dependent on Ishwar, Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh. And actually it's a lot more extreme than this. And I'm giving a very abbreviated discussion of Ishwar here. There's much more that can be said, just some high points. But in God Speaks, there is a section of chapter 8. In the second edition, third printing, you'll find it pages 89 to 93. It's that section. And it's maybe the most difficult part of God Speaks, or it's one of the most difficult, but it's extraordinarily deep and illuminating. And I have passages here, but I won't try to read them. We would need to spend an hour and a half just on those. But this is to try to summarize or essentialize some of what Baba says there. Baba is talking about the past, the present, and the future. the 3 points of time,
Yes.
right? You get that idea? The 3 points of time are the past, present, and future. And Baba links those with Brahma, with creator, preserver, destroyer. Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh. And this would be a way of explaining some of what he says. Right, you guys and me, we all think we're experiencing the present, right? Don't you think so? It's like, what is it? 11:20 and 1 second after that, and now it's 4 seconds after it. We all think we're experiencing the present. We're not. What we are actually experiencing, now Sanskaras do come into the picture here. What we are experiencing is the past recorded in our sanskaras coming up and projecting themselves as if they were the present. Now, do you get the idea? We could not experience this room if we didn't have the sanskaras that allow us to do that.
Yeah.
Right? And where do the sanskaras come from? Past experience. So those past experiences recorded in our sanskaras await for an appropriate moment, which is now, and they project themselves on the screen of our consciousness. And we think, oh, I'm experiencing the present, but we're not. We're experiencing the past as if it were the present. So Brahma has created the past as if it were the present. But through the very process of experiencing the past as if the present, it's being preserved for us by preserver, Vishnu. But the very act of preservation presupposes a destruction at some point, right? So the very act of preservation makes inevitable the destruction of the present. And that's why our experience goes on changing, right? It changes every moment, does it not? I mean, in little ways, you know. Right now, you know, like in a sentence, I am using a sentence. I, but the next moment it's am, and the next moment it's using, and this next moment the, like that. Every moment goes on and on and on. That is this very process. Brahma is creating the past from our sanskaras, which we experience as if they were the present, and through the act of preservation, the destruction of them is made inevitable, and we go on to the next thing.
Ward, I think a nice metaphor is presented by the medium of cinema, where if you have 24 frames per second, it's each one comes up one by one by one.
Right, right. And the only reason you can experience it as a cinematic stream is they go on changing. So whatever you had at one instant gives way to the very next instant. And Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh, creator, preserver, and destroyer, make all of this possible. So the point of this that I want to be making is our very process of experience is totally dependent on creation, preservation, and destruction. We couldn't experience, like, always, the direct connection for us is through Vishnu. I always, O Parvardagar, the preserver and protector of all. Back in the days when I first read this, I was saying, well, okay, preserver and protector, I'm into that, but how about the creator and destroyer? Okay? Once again, a beaming Vishnu and Brahma and Shiva who are kind of pissed off, right? Well, that's because it is through the work of Vishnu that we experience. It's because Vishnu holds it in place that we can experience anything. Brahma is the precondition of that, and Shiva or Mahesh is the future of that. But it is because Vishnu is preserving that we experience. That is our direct link through the work of Vishnu. Thus it is that the avatar in Hinduism is Vishnu descending. Yeah. But actually all three are implied. So, you see how Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh are linked with the 3 points of time? Do you follow that? Brahma is resurrecting the past, and Vishnu is holding it in place as if it were the present. And Shiva is the inevitable destruction that makes us move on, which we endlessly do through the stream of our experience. So Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh are part of every instant of our experience, continuously. So if somebody were to say, okay, Ishwar comes down, and I ask, hey Ishwar, you're so smart, you're such a hotshot, you're all-powerful, etc., etc. How is it that you don't know that you're God? And I imagine Ishwar saying, I don't have time, I'm too busy. Look at what Ishwar is doing all the time.
I imagine him saying, who are you talking to?
Because Ishwar has to do this for every drop soul in creation all the time.
Does he do it simultaneously, or is it a different junction of time according to their sanskara?
Well, every moment of time involves Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh.
For all the individualized soul?
For every individualized soul.
Word, I recall
For
from
every,
your seminar about infinite intelligence that
Yeah.
it could be said that each Jivatma sort of has its own little Ishwar.
Yeah. I do think that that's the case. I'm just not going into it here because it's such a big topic. But creation and its causes has some passages that I think clearly imply that, yeah.
There's an Upanishad, the Mundaka Upanishad, and it opens with a verse which says, on a branch on a tree, there are two birds. One of the birds enjoys the fruits of the tree, and the other just looks on. And then it says that one of the birds is the Jivatman and the other is Ishwar.
Yeah.
And but here Ishwar is used a little bit differently.
Yeah.
It really represents the higher self.
Yeah, that's the thing. In Hinduism, Ishwar gets used in many different meanings, often just as God. Actually, in Advaita Vedanta, Ishwar is Sagun Brahman, it's called, the God with attributes, as opposed to Nirgun Brahman, which is Brahman without attributes. That actually would be relatable to what we were talking about yesterday, but there wasn't time to go into it. And that Sagun Brahman is, I think, we could make that connection with infinite intelligence, to tell the truth. But when you read in Hindu literature and you read about Ishwar, you can't assume it means the same thing as this. Baba's using these words in a way by his own definitions. Yeah.
Just to share my own experience, after I learned about the role of Ishwar and how he's working around the clock, like probably every second, and he does it all for us. So I realized that he's always in now.
Yeah.
Now, and then I thought, really sticking to the past and going to the past and thinking, oh, this happened and that happened and I did this, really doesn't exist because Ishwar is moving on. So if you really put this, I thought, if I put this in my mind, the graphic image of Ishwar is at work and he's now, then there isn't any flashback or sorrow and all that stuff about the past.
Yeah.
That's how I interpret it.
Well,
Is it
Ishwar
right?
is, I feel, and this is the third state of God and God speaks. If all we had is God speaks, I don't think we would, although God speaks has critical passage, I was just talking about it, but I don't think we could really fully appreciate what Ishwar is just from God speaks, although we need it. But it's the basis, I think, for time. Brahma, the 3 points of time. Brahma is relating to making the past present, and Vishnu is holding the present in place so that we can experience, witness, and Shiva is making us move on to the next moment. If Shiva weren't there, it would be like you're watching a film and it freezes on one frame, right? Well,
Is that what happened to Mast's God Intoxicate Soul? Shiva doesn't
but they're
move them up?
actually having their own experience. It's just, maybe in gross terms it is. Yeah, did you want?
Excuse me, when we start to deeply love Baba,
Yeah,
and love Baba and as a God and God value, and start many aspects at the Baba's like beautifulness in the whole
yeah.
nature. That moment we can stop that effect of at the past, present, and future.
Yeah.
That moment when we are starting deeply love Baba.
Well, yeah, that you could say that the love for God and the entire spiritual path is the process of learning how to stop this eventually. What happens this afternoon we'll talk about the path, but what happens at first is that this goes on in more and more rarefied and elevated levels, you know. If you're on the path, you subtle consciously, but for subtle consciously this happens too, and even mentally conscious. Happens for everyone. This chart represents gross conscious people, but eventually it has to stop. What this Ishwar business does is it splits eternity into the 3 points of time. It turns eternity into time. Or to be more benevolent, Ishwar is responding to creatures like us who are in time. And it makes eternity available to our experience through the 3 points of time. And they're continuously cycling. I mean, I imagine Ishwar is like this, cycling so fast you can't even see it, for every Jivatma in the entire universe. So this is really quite a mind-boggling vision of what the third state of God is. Yeah.
So as far as the time goes, I mean, I get the point here. So you said Brahma is taking the past and
Making it present, yeah.
correct, and we said that the sanskaras from past life or
Yeah.
past day, yesterday, or how does that work? Because
Yeah.
it's confusing. What we are sitting here is what was, we brought to this because of the sanskaras. I get that. But we're making sanskaras now. So is that,
Yeah.
we have to wait for that to manifest again, or how does that work?
Well, because I know we devoted 4 whole sessions to an integrated darshana, but actually there are all these topics I'm skipping over, and one of them is sanskaras, and we need to devote a whole session to that. But even with a whole session, I couldn't answer the question. Apparently there are different kinds of sanskaras with different terms. Some seem to come up immediately, and some hold their place for periods of time. There must be some there must be different sorts of sanskaras, it seems to me. Baba never exactly talked about that. But I will say this, and then I'll have to go on because sanskaras is such a huge topic in its own right. There's a part of God Speaks actually that corresponds to this, pages 110 to 111. Baba brings this up in a different way. And so I'll put the two together and say, Ishwar, in creating, preserving, and destroying these spheres for Raki, or for the human being, is actually responsive to the sanskaras, like if I need to wake up, it's my sanskaras that are doing it. And Ishwar is creating scenes for me that are appropriate for the experience of the sanskaras. So actually, I mean, look what a selfless dude Ishwar is, who is continuously creating and preserving and destroying universes, all so that I can use those as mediums for my experience. But what happens is Ishwar creates a scene and my sanskaras arise and I spend them. But here's in fact, I'll put this on the board because it's such a great word. Upabog. For those of infinite intelligence buffs, will know.
Sooner or later it all comes up.
Yeah. It's a good word. Upabog, you could say, is enjoyment and enjoyment / suffering. We don't have an English word that combines those two, but upabog does. So what happens is like, you know, a delicious LA Center lunch looms before my eyes, and I take a fork and put a mouthful in it. I'm spending sanskaras, and I take the upabog of it. Intense enjoyment, practically divine bliss, right? So in the course of spending those sanskaras, because I take the upabog, I get new ones. And you know, the LA lunches are so savory that I probably get 100 new ones for each one that I spend, right? So that's the process of sanskaras, but that's a whole topic that needs its own treatment that we won't be able to get into here. Yeah.
Well, I think that, you know, power, God is knowledge, power and bliss, right?
Yeah.
So knowledge, to create you need knowledge. So that's the aspect of creator, which is knowledge, right? And then to preserve something you need power, and that's what preserves. And then the last is just the experience or the manifestation of that, which is gross when we see it. So that's, to me, that's...
I would be reluctant to try to make that correlation work, actually. I think they're different principles myself. But we could have that whole discussion itself. I think these trinities are quite different from each other. By the way, sometimes people will try to bring up the Christian Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and I don't think it works with these. Where I actually go with that is beyond state 2A, 2B, and 2C. I would run with that one. But that's a whole separate topic. Yeah.
Well, you know, in the beginning when you put those up there, you know, it's just our natural inclination to try to relate because
Right.
we're three.
Right.
We want to relate everything together, and I don't think you can do that.
I don't think they do interrelate,
Yeah.
actually. I think they're different principles. So when we were I was you know, the very beginning about how these trinities are cosmic architecture, and I would say they are perennial. I don't call them eternal, because Creator, Preserver, Destroyer operates in time. By the way, you know, doesn't this make, I hope it does make sense, that the Creator, Preserver, Destroyer relates specifically to what happens. Time, it doesn't create the spaces in which it happens. It relates to the happening. But knowledge, power, and bliss, so to speak, in quotation marks, create the spaces, right? The mental sphere, the gross sphere, and the subtle sphere. So it's sort of giving the landscape, but then what happens there is governed by Ishwar, by splitting the eternal now, splitting timelessness into the 3 points of time. Because how can anything happen if you're in eternity, if there's no time? Nothing can happen if things don't change, and change implies different moments of time. So it's through Ishwar that occurs. I think time is a consequence of Ishwar, and the spaces are a consequence of knowledge, power, bliss, and their shadows, which create the scenes in which things transpire. And now coming to, I think this is sort of putting, you know, I gave the analogy of the trillionaire, quadrillionaire throwing out emeralds and sapphires and diamonds. Baba never went through all this. He gave the essential points that we need to understand it all, but he never wrote his 250 books explaining every point. But I think when you work it out, this is an amazing vision of reality. I've never seen anything to match it. No dishonor to Shankaracharya and Ibn Arabi and Muhammad and Krishna and all the guys of the past. They were giving what was suited for them. But I think the new avatar has really, when the time comes that humanity gets over all its inanities of the present time and starts to seriously look at an account of God and creation, this people will not, when you get people to the point where they can understand this, they won't be able to resist it. It is so deep and profound and satisfying. My opinion, obviously I'm a little bit prejudiced, having spent my life editing this stuff. But I don't care if I'm prejudiced or not, I'm going to say it anyway.
Yeah, I understand.
So now the other trinity is wakefulness, dream, and sound sleep. And this, Baba kept bringing this up. Once you become aware of it, you can find this all over the place, from the beginning to the end. Now this is from In God's Hand. I won't start with this one, but where will I start? Yeah, actually what we just saw here does relate to it, right? Wakefulness, dream, and sound sleep. These are some of the charts from various books that have to do with this. I'm not stopping to linger on them, but just, you see at the bottom, sound sleep, in the middle, dream, wakefulness, dream, sound sleep. I'm going to start with this one, as a matter of fact. This is from God Speaks. And this is, of course, these are states that are part of our daily experience. The gross subtle mental is not. It's only accessible to advanced souls to directly see this. And creator, preserver, destroyer, these are abstract principles. But wakefulness, dream, sound sleep we experience. Or you could say we experience sound sleep. We know that we were sound asleep, even though you're unconscious when you're in that state. And that's part of our daily cycle. But in Vedanta, I think Baba's metaphysics and ontology and these things, it's closer to Vedanta than any other great tradition. When it comes to the spiritual path, I think Sufism would really have a lot to offer there. But these ideas are right there in Vedanta, as a matter of fact. I'll just hit you with a little slide where I have some of this here. Yeah, like wakefulness, Jagrat is a Hindu name, which is experienced through the Sthul Sharir, or gross body, and you experience Vishva or Vaishvanara. So I won't go through all of these, but I just want you to know that in Vedanta these ideas are very much explored, these three states. Baba has taken a distinctive turn by turning the three states into five. And actually, we saw that right here. I'll go back to this. This is In God's Hand, that manuscript Baba hand wrote, published in the book In God's Hand. And this chart in various forms recurs 15 or 20 times in Baba's book. So these are the three states: ordinary awake state, ordinary dream, and ordinary sound sleep, right? So our daily cycle is going around and around and around through those three. I forget how many, what would it be? How many days do we live in a typical, let's say you live to be 100 years old, so that's 36,000 days, something like that. So we do that 30,000 times in a lifetime, say, the cycle. But Baba explained in Infinite Intelligence that when you get on the spiritual path, which is here, divine dream, that's Turiya, i.e. The 7 planes and their manifestations, which actually means the 6 planes. What happens in the for subtle conscious souls is they start to experience dream in full wakefulness. It's wakeful dreaming, you know. In our ordinary dream, it's subconscious. But when a yogi on the first, second, third, fourth planes, they're actually experiencing dream in the wide awake state. It's infinite intelligence, where Baba really talks about this. And when you finish, so this would be the spiritual path, right? The 6 planes are here. And when you get God realized, this would be the 7th plane. What it is you are experiencing sound sleep while remaining wide awake. It's being sound sleep and wide awake at the same time. That's all you need to do. So when you go to sleep tonight and you're going from dream into sound sleep, just remember, remain wide awake while you're in sound sleep and you're God realized. And what I think this does bring into view, I mean, sometimes we could think, God realization is so far away, it's billions of years away, I have to go through this long, long journey, etc., etc. But actually, we're that close to it, you know? It's a hair's breadth that separates it. And the problem, like in, we were just talking about past, present, future, we've shattered the eternal now into past, present, future. All we would have to do is get them together again, and we would be God realized. We're actually very, very close, but it's just that we've split what is one into a multiplicity of things. The same is true here. We've split the eternity of pure consciousness, I guess you could say, in Vedanta terms, into these 3 separate states of sound sleep, dream, and wakefulness. And if we could just unite them, we would be there. The problem is that we experience them one at a time. We experience them separately. So thus we have these 3 states of sound sleep, dream, and wakefulness. But Baba consistently turns the 3 states into 5. And this is a pattern you'll see throughout his books from beginning to end.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, it is like the basis for another theme.
Yeah.
That is constantly recurring in all of the books.
It certainly is.
Yeah, and the value of this session, I think, is that you get to see how they all are connected, even though they're very different kind of points of view.
Yeah. So in God Speaks, in chapter 8, that long chapter, about halfway through, if some of you know it well or can bring it to mind, Baba gives a long analogy of a man who's sound asleep, who's waking up. I don't know if you remember that. He goes through 7 stages where first his eyes are just opening a teeny bit and he has the tiniest little awareness. And he goes through 7 stages. This is about 5-6 pages long. And at the end of it, his eyes are wide open and he is awake, and that corresponds to having achieved gross consciousness. This correlates with the evolutionary journey. Okay, there are other charts which show that. Let me see. Yeah, no, this is not that. Okay. Yeah, this actually shows it, but there are a bunch of diagrams that do. So, in fact, you could correlate these 3 states turned into 5 states with the entire journey of the divine theme, right? These ideas of Baba's are very, very powerful. Remember the divine theme from the whim of God to evolution to reincarnation to involution to God realization? Well, you could correlate it this way. You begin in sound sleep in the beyond state, the unconscious sound sleep state. And through the long journey of evolution, Baba actually correlates this with the dream state. through evolution, you're dreaming. You're not fully conscious yet. In human form, you're wide awake. You're fully conscious. In the planes of consciousness, Baba would use the term sub-superconscious. Superconsciousness is God realization. So it's sub-superconscious. You're getting there, right? And Baba characterizes this as wakeful dreaming. And God realization is sound sleep by being wide awake at the same time. And let me show you another chart where I've drawn this out. Yeah. So you begin in sound sleep in the original beyond state, right? So those of you who have read God Speaks might remember the beyond state, the first state of God, of unconsciousness. Then, through the journey of evolution, you're dreaming. It's actually subconscious experience of the subtle, as Baba has put it. The 5 stages of the divine theme. Actually, from beyond, the creation from there, evolution, reincarnation, involution, and God realization, right? Those are the 5 stages of the divine theme. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, right? So you begin in sound sleep, you proceed through a long dream of evolution. In God Speaks, Baba does call this the divine dream. You achieve wakefulness in the gross realization of human form. You become gross conscious. That's the full experience of wakefulness. And here we're doing this cycling thing. Wakefulness, dream, sound sleep, dream, wakefulness, dream, sound sleep, dream, wakefulness. That's the treadmill that we're on. We could correlate this with the wheel of karma and lots of other wheels. I'm trying to talk about Baba's Darshana one theme at a time, and this is wakefulness, dream, sound sleep one. And eventually, you get beyond enslavement to gross consciousness. Your gross conscious sanskaras disappear finally, and you enter into the subtle sphere. And now this is involution. It's a wakeful dream. You're wide awake while dreaming. You know, there's, again, I think a kind of intuitive awareness of this that pops up in popular culture, like to dream the impossible dream, right? Remember that? Well, follow your dreams, right? Well, I think this is an intuitive awareness that the subtle world, the involutionary journey, is a wakeful experience of dreaming. I think this pops out in poetic expression here and there, in my opinion. And at the end, you become wide awake while sound asleep. So the entire divine theme can be characterized in terms of these 3 categories. Right? You follow that idea? I'm trying to interrelate a lot of these things. Yeah?
Does it have to do anything with your third eye opening? Maybe that's the one that keeps you awake.
Yeah, that's at the very end where you're divine, you could say, you're divinely dreaming the reality. You actually see the reality, but you're still dreaming. You're still in the dream state. But you directly see the reality there. It'd be easier to talk about it if we had experienced it. Anyway, I'm just, monkey see, monkey do. I just read books and then talk about it. I've never experienced any of this myself. Someday, maybe. Yeah, so this is another representation of this. So this is correlating the divine dream to the 5 states. 3 states become 5. In Vedanta, they don't have this 3 states become 5 thing. This seems to be a distinct, they do have a fourth state, they call it Turiyavasta, actually, which is the same thing as God realization. And Baba used Turiyavasta in a number of different ways. For questions like this, by the way, if some of these books like Creation's Causes or Discourses, Revised 6th Edition, or Tiffin Lectures, the glossaries will often give explanations of the use of these terms. And Turiyavasta is one of them. Baba gave it a number of different meanings over the years. So from the original Beyond state, this is sound sleep. In infinite intelligence, this is called the fine sphere. We haven't had time to get into that here, but it's a very useful term. In evolution, you're dreaming the subtle sphere. In reincarnation, you're wakeful of the gross sphere in full consciousness. When you were dreaming, you were semi-conscious. In involution, you're having a wakeful dream. You're experiencing the subtle sphere in full consciousness. And in God realization, wakeful sound sleep, the fine sphere, this is infinite intelligence lingo, and you're fully conscious of it. So these are the 5 states. And we have them in God Speaks also. This chart here. And there's this and a little bit more. By the way, I have it here somewhere. When Meryl and I were working on this. Yeah, where is it? Anyway, I have it somewhere. I'm not seeing it just at the moment. Yeah, here it is. We found this. This was a real discovery. This popped up in archives. Vishnu preserved it for, I'm sure Shiva was wanting to destroy it, but he didn't get to it yet. So this is on the backside, isn't this is anyway, when you do textual scholarship, this is like a really cool sort of thing. It was on the backside of a postcard, and here's where we got the date. Postal stamp.
Right.
Mahabaleshwar, January 54. What book do you imagine Baba might have been working on?
God Speaks.
God Speaks. So, and this is Erich's handwriting. I would say the likelihood that Erich himself was just ruminating on these things and just came up with this diagram himself is precisely 0%. Obviously, Baba gave this to him, right? And this is the very same diagram as we saw earlier. It's the very same diagram as this. So 30 years later, Baba gave this to Erich, quite obviously. And I think it's obvious that it got developed into this. So that's almost certainly the first beginning point of that diagram. And what this is the relevant portion. Atma's ordinary awake state, Atma's ordinary dream state, Atma's unconscious sound sleep state, Atma's dream state, divine dream state, and Atma's divine awake state, right? These are the same 5. So he puts sound sleep in the middle. It's neither divine nor ordinary because sound sleep is common to both, actually. Ordinary souls experience it, and it's both divine and ordinary at the same time. So if we were exploring this more fully, we would read In God's Hand. It has a very significant treatment of this. And there's one part which Baba seems to, this is my glossing of what Baba says. It's like the spiritual path is, so to speak, on the far side of sound sleep. And when sound sleep is fana, it's an annihilation, actually. It's one of the 3 kinds of fana that in God Speaks. But if you can pass through to the far side, you get to the spiritual path. And that's what this diagram, like those others, shows. Gross wakefulness, ordinary dream, sound sleep, divine dream, and wide awake state. Those are the 5 states. And since it's time for some lunch upabog, I'll spend about 1 minute on microcosm, macrocosm, which we have actually already talked about
Yeah, you covered.
a bit. I mean, all of these topics could be explored in much greater detail, but this was the God Speaks chart. I just want to, remind you all that we talked about that. Remember this? Where through the gross body, which is the gross shadow, you experience the gross sphere, which is the big gross shadow. The sphere, like this room, is for us the universe at the moment, for many of us, you might say. And our bodies are the small gross shadow. Through the body, you experience the sphere. By thinking the false imagination in the form, you identify with it and it becomes I. This is the subject I. It's ignorant. I'm not really the body at all, but I identify with it. And through that identification, the body, remember, is the opening. Remember that? It opens the world, the sphere, to my experience. If I didn't have a body, I couldn't experience it through the 5 senses and ruminations on that. And the body, the universe is you or it, subject, object. That basic dichotomy is the basis for all experience. If we didn't have that dichotomy, we couldn't experience anything. And if you become aware of this, you find it all over the place in Baba's diagrams and discussions. And this is like one example. This is from that booklet, The Divine Theme, which I showed you. And this is reproduced, this diagram in God Speaks. And what this is the bodies of the different, kingdoms, stone, metal, etc., up to human. And these are, people on the subtle plane, and these are people on the mental plane. So these are the bodies, and these are the spheres. Through the body, you experience the gross world. When you're subtle conscious, through your subtle body, you experience the subtle world. And when you're mental conscious, through the mental body, you experience the mental world. This is the same idea, microcosm, macrocosm. And yesterday, when we talked about thinking the imagination, the macrocosm is the imagination. It is the manifestation of nothing, if you remember that. Whereas the body is the manifestation of nothing, but it's the home for the everything, which is me. The Atma identifies with the body, and through it experiences the imagination, thinks the imagination. So this is the basis. Macrocosm, macrocosm is the basis for subject-object, for I, you. All experience depends on it, and it has an absolutely critical part in Meherabad's Darshana. And with that, it is time for some upabog, lunch. Okay, Jai Baba, everybody.